What's up, everybody? I am Cypher, the host and moderator of the Crowdsourced Politics podcast, and this is the CSP News Roundup. On today's show, I am joined by Chase Mitchell.
Hey, how's it going?
Art Black.
What up, what up?
And Mateo DeGaulle.
Hey, how's it going?
Universal Discourse will be joining us, or should be joining us shortly. So, if this is your first time tuning into the News Roundup, we do this typically every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, and we cover the week's news from Wednesday to Wednesday. This week I was camping, so we had to push it back a day, so that's why we're doing it today instead of on Wednesday. So before we get into this week's news, how has everybody been this past week?
I feel like it's just status quo for me. I go to work every day. Work is slightly more hectic than usual, but I basically don't leave my house. And I've recently converted from not even going to grocery stores. I just have groceries delivered. So I basically only leave my house to take my dog out, but I'm weirdly okay with that for right now.
Hey, do what you got to do, man. What about you, Art? How's life? What's shaking? We've been talking.
Well, I have to agree there. Like, you think that you're not going to like the whole idea of having groceries delivered because, like, I don't know. When I'm picking out my Frosted Flakes, I want to get the right box. You just kind of like they got 3 or 4, and you're just like, one's a little bent or whatever, and you just like, no. After you get groceries delivered a couple times, you're just like, I'm never going near you, weird like, I don't know, just other humans ever again. I'm fucking done with it. So big fan.
And it just saves so much time. You just go
Absolutely.
to the website, you punch everything in, you pay a premium, sure, but what's time worth?
Right?
Well, money, now that you ask. So time is money. So there's other shit you could be doing with that time that's probably a better use of your time. So, yeah, I'm all for it.
Yeah, what is it, like $10-15 or so to like do it online, and then plus like another $5 delivery fee?
It depends on which vendor and which grocery store, but I mean, it is a little bit more. It's not crazy though. It's not like it's not 10 or 20% more,
Yeah, I was surprised how cheap it was when I ordered my parents like their birthday gifts, because I got them like a whole meal from a store and a cake and I had it delivered and stuff, and it wasn't expensive at all. What about you, Mateo? What's going on with you? How stonks?
Hemorrhaging money like crazy.
Oh,
No, not really. I'm doing all right.
You're not going to the moon?
No, I actually am, because I've rotated into value while all the other kids who just started investing in March stayed in tech. So yeah, no, I was just joking. I'm actually doing pretty good. I'm happy with it, but it's really nothing exciting happening.
No, nah.
The 10-year yield, which none of our viewers probably care about, and none of us probably care about because it's not that big of a deal.
But
yeah, I feel like
sounds
you have
like
an
there's a but
out there. What about the 10-year yield?
Right, yeah.
People care. People got to know.
Don't leave us in suspense.
I don't know. It's just the cost of borrowing. I don't know, it's just nerdy shit that I feel like, political people don't like. It's not really our target market.
Listen,
well, you would be wrong.
I have an emote in my chat that's literally hold with a diamond in the background.
Excuse me, sir.
So I don't know what you're trying to imply here, but I think that I care and that a lot of people care about what's going on, especially with meme stocks. Okay, meme stocks are important, and it's okay to really care about what's going on with them.
When the yield goes up, your meme stocks go down.
Yeah, but then you profit, right? Because you played those you played those old school boomer plays.
Yeah, me. And actually Buffett too, and
I mean, ultimate boomer investor,
off what
though.
Buffett does. Yeah, I'm just.
All right.
It's not my own recipe.
Can I tell you my investing strategy? It's to take all of the money that I care about and that I'm going to rely on when I'm old and put that into traditional, like target date, good growth stock mutual funds and ignore it, right? Set it and forget it. It's a good model of investing. But I also, when I have some spare money, really love to throw it at whatever the thing du jour is. Like for a while, like Bitcoin was the thing du jour. And then it was this and that and the other thing. And now it's meme stocks. And you know what? I put a little bit of money into meme stocks, not because I really think that it's a long-term investing strategy, but because I want to have that incentive and that desire to pay attention to what's going on. And boy, does having a couple $100 of skin in the game really make it that much more interesting,
So when you get a little bit of money, you throw it at your thing du jour? I do that too. Her name's Destiny. I don't think she's a real redhead, but she's a lot of fun.
Dye it and apply it, right?
Oh my god. Oh man.
Anyway, this is not real stock advice. Please do not take advice from us.
No.
Yeah, I threw that up. We're good.
Did you? Okay, yeah.
Listen, we are definitely finance professionals. At least I am legitimate. I joke. I am legitimately a finance professional in my real life. So take it from me. Meme stocks are fun.
I think the only like good play I've had was that NRZ thing that's Sean, another member of our community, pointed us out to. I lucked out so bad. I bought it at the very bottom and then sold it at the very top.
Like March 13th.
Yeah.
Nice.
Or whatever that date is.
NRZ. I don't even know that one.
It's a real estate REIT.
Okay.
What's that?
New residential.
Yeah, I think it's new residential real estate company. Basically, they were valued at like 15 a share for like, I don't know, 20 years or some BS, and they did a reevaluation, and the stock just plummeted because they're getting their dividends differently. And so I'm like, well, if it's been 20 years at 15,
the world was like panicking.
Yeah.
This is when Sean told you about it, right?
Yeah, sure. Well, I don't remember what day was.
Oh, it was like, yeah.
So this was like sometime last year, though.
Yeah, during the panic.
Yeah. So the March crash happened, but also they did a revaluation, and now it's like $10 a share again. So, hey, Universal, welcome back. How has your week been? We've just been BSing before getting involved into the news, so just checking in on everybody.
I'm tired. Trying to do a lot of work in really bad weather and all that kind of thing.
Sorry to hear that. What are you getting? What kind of work are you getting done?
Well, we're doing.
That sounds wrong. Where do we put that?
What kind of work are we not getting done? Is that what
Correct.
you wanted to say? Well, everything. No, just kidding. But we're building on, building up our debate team and
awesome.
The guild that we're creating for Twitch streamers. And
Good. I'm glad that this is continuing. For anybody that is joining us for the first time or watches this after we're live, Universal Discord hosts regular debate panels where you cannot use the word you during debate or I during the debate, depersonalizing it in order to make a more robust debate structure. So I highly recommend everybody please check it out when you can, either through a VOD or live on Twitch. So with that said, let's get into the news this week. We've had some pretty big things happening. We've had movement on DC statehood to a degree, also movement on some tweets about Puerto Rico statehood. We have Biden's first press conference. We're going to have a news of the weird segment like we're adding every week now that Art Black is going to relish in on this, going over that information. So what do you guys want to start on first? One other thing that we should be covering this week is the border crisis and how that's playing out and why. So what is there any particular topic you all want to cover first? We can do news of the word first. We can do whatever.
I feel like, we're coming hot off the heels that Biden press conference, which I feel like focused on the border a lot. So maybe that's a good place to start.
All right. So for anybody who didn't get a chance to watch it live, Biden had his first press conference today where he answered questions from 10 journalists, and it lasted about an hour and 10 minutes or so, give or take a few minutes. Covered a variety of topics, but didn't really cover COVID so much, didn't call on Fox News, so they're very upset with that, and also went over the border crisis issues. From my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, panel, he has put Kamala Harris. Got it. Kamala Harris.
It makes it easy.
White male.
Yeah, I'm so bad at that. No, I know how to pronounce it correctly, but then everybody's correcting everybody else. Yeah, I did.
It almost sounded like you got it right the first time. You should just.
I'm just second guessing myself.
It correctly.
We're just calling her Cam now because nobody can say it right. It's like Cam.
It's Kamala Harris. is
Come on.
going to be in charge of trying to address the border crisis. So, border crisis, what is it? Anybody want to fill us in a little bit about this? Who's the
That's
expert
a
today?
Yeah, it's just the normal seasonal spikes that we see, but now that there's a Democrat in charge, we're going to pretend like it's something that's never happened before. Is a short
Right.
answer.
yeah.
It's true.
It's not a crisis.
I think
In other words.
that well, there's two things. Two things can be true at the same time. This is
Let's
not
get-
the highest level we've ever had, right? So this is not like the peak number of migrants and apprehensions at the border. So in that respect, it is not a crisis, right?
It's not the Clinton administration.
And calling it a crisis is a little bit silly, but and it's also true that we would expect to see a tick up this time of year. But there are two things that are true. The tick up seems earlier this year, which means that we're likely to get a bigger peak, and we likely will surpass like the highest number ever in the next month or two. That seems likely to happen. But the other thing is, and this is an actual crisis, is that the number of unaccompanied minors is way higher than typical. So the portion of this group, even though it's not the largest group ever, has more unaccompanied minors than ever. And we are absolutely struggling to deal with that reality. And that's what I think the crisis is.
I mean, yeah, if it's resulting in like warehousing children all over again, we should call it a crisis just because it's not the same as it was during Bill Clinton's tenure. As far as volume goes, seems almost irrelevant. It's like that's almost like a point that anyone could win against, but no one's making. So, I mean, it's a classic straw man when you think about it. Everyone's like, this is a crisis. Like, oh, look at those other years. It's like, yeah, those were bad and they existed, but I mean, we could not call it a crisis if that helps. We could call it like a bad time. Whatever helps like address it.
Now, by warehousing, would we say that we're taking these kids and we're encaging them in a structure that I don't know. I feel like I'm grasping for a word here. Can anyone help me out?
Cages?
Oh,
said-
right.
They're mostly made of plastic. We'll just say temporary temporary holding, I guess, is maybe a way of putting it.
We
Okay.
got a lot of leftover zip ties from the BLM riots, and we just kind of made
Uh,
chain link fencing out of
okay,
it.
okay.
Or the Capitol riots.
Come on though. Like we need to be very careful with our language here because and this is also true during the Trump administration, to be entirely honest. Like the language that we are using to describe this may or may not be, I just think it's just not an accurate representation of what was happening. Like are kids being kept in conditions that are unacceptable for at least days at a time? Yeah, but are they literally in cages? No, that's not what's happening. Are these literally concentration
time.
camps? No,
High time we
like
talk
we
about
need
this.
to be we need to be careful. We need to be careful about our language because, like, I do believe that the Biden administration is currently trying to fix what is a totally messed up situation. Like, there is no doubt that these kids should not be subjected to this, but we just need to be careful about what language we're using because I think that it might actually diminish our ability to address it and confront what has happened and confront it going forward.
I bring it up only because it's unavoidable. So we may as well just kind of lampshade it up front. There is this issue of, the underlying problem, regardless of how you want to deal with it, or if you want to be, constructive, or if you just want to be punitive. Either way, you have a logistical problem when you have large numbers of people with no resources. You're attempting to make a long, kind of a cross-country trek all at the same time. So it's going to invariably create, strain that would demand, some type of resources to alleviate. When you're looking at resource-limited responses like what you have, for efficiency's sake, you tend to cluster people together, and you wind up with kids in cages. Or some sort of situation where that's comparable because no matter what, because you have these conditions, the ways that we've chosen to deal with it more or less funnel people into these certain type of responses. So we're just kind of stuck with it because we've decided to try and kind of apprehend and detain people at the border rather than let them come across and basically move into the country and you go through the legal process that way. And a lot of times, if you have nothing when you're coming across, there's going to be a humanitarian problem anyway. You just have nowhere to go. So we need some kind of organized response. It's just not being adequately resourced.
The idea that I just think that this refrain that we should just let people come across the border and handle themselves and go wherever they want would actually produce outcomes that we don't want. There
Correct.
are so many instances of people trying to travel through southern Texas and across the country, of them dying out in the middle of nowhere because they don't have access to anything, or being mistreated, picked up by actors who have malintent, and being abused or trafficked or whatever. Like, part of the reason that we are apprehending people is not because they have done something illegal. In fact, most of the people, if they're coming here seeking asylum, are coming here legally, regardless of how they get in. If they're seeking asylum, they are coming here legally, right? We often lose sight of that. Apprehensions does not mean crime. Coming and applying for asylum does not mean crime. Like, we need to be clear about this. But part of the reason we apprehend them is for their own safety, so that they can be processed and transported somewhere safe. Biden even said today, like, a lot of these kids, these unaccompanied minors who are showing up, literally have like a wristband with a phone number, and they don't know if that phone number is going to connect them to a family member or somebody who actually has their best interests at heart, or they don't know if it's somebody who is, at the other end of a trafficking ring. Like, if you don't have systems in place to meet these people at the border and provide them with assistance, I think the outcomes are going to be far worse. That's where I'm at. Like, I think the border is still important,
I think
there's still a reason
that's.
for. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mateo.
Yeah, there's still a reason for jurisdictions, and even when it comes to immigration, they're just from an accounting standpoint, you want to know who's in the country when, especially when you're talking about the southern border too. It's not exactly known for being a highway that criminals stay away from, or I shouldn't say a highway, an area where criminals don't traffic in various whatever you want to call it, activities.
No, that's a very good point. I think one of the things is that we lose sight of is that there's actually, the debate isn't just between open borders or fully closed borders. There is a debate that's kind of, I hate to say it, centrist, where it's like, no, we want reasonable immigration reform and laws in order to address our needs as well as the needs of other people and still maintain some sort of border. And that gets really lost in the debates online because, for the most part, you're only hearing from people that want either completely closed borders or completely open borders. So I think that's a good point that we should bring up as well. One other thing to note is that I don't know the exact numbers of how long a child was kept in the processing facilities under the Trump administration. I do know that the Obama administration is trying to move them out of those facilities as quickly as possible, while Trump was trying to maximize the time that they spent in each step of the process in order, and separating children from their relatives or whoever it was. There might have been human traffickers in there as well, but separating them and each step of the process of it, trying to get the person that they had their child that was with the child to give up their asylum claim in order to get the child back. So that's a thing that's a stark difference between what's happening under the Biden administration and the Trump administration.
Well, and keep in mind the abhorrent reason, like the Trump administration's stated goal was to make the humanitarian situation worse so that it would discourage people from trying to make the journey in the first place. That probably wasn't very effective based on the numbers, right? But the abhorrent reason, they didn't have they didn't think it was going to make anything better. They didn't think that it was going to improve the situation. They literally just wanted to make the humanitarian situation worse to discourage people from coming, which is so gross.
True. Well, and that kind of gets down to, what your objective is. Like when you talk about open versus closed borders, as things go, from a more like libertarian standpoint, ideally I would prefer something that would be very nearly open borders. However, in order to get there, you have these various systems and subsystems that all feed into each other that kind of create this net effect. So rather than just looking and saying, well, my desired aggregate end state is for more open borders, ergo we should just stop controlling it. Like, actually, no, like you should be taking a step back to all of these feeder systems, everything from let's say the war on drugs, which creates destabilization south of the border, crime, all kinds of problems, which then trickles its way, back up north. just as one example, there's all kinds of these subsystems that are out there that create these effects that have, side effects we don't want to deal with, or that are negative. So, to get to our desired end state, I think it's better to think about where we want to go and then address all of the various problems, on their own to kind of, change the dynamic. Because right now we have, like you were just saying, they decided that their desired end state was to make it unattractive to come to the U.S., so they would make it miserable. In a real kind of a, cynical way, that's kind of what I'm talking about, is that, you figure out what effect you want to have, and then you work on systems that will get you there. So that's just, the opposite direction, but there's better ways to do it. We just need to think about what an ideal situation at the border would look like, and then figure out what is contributing to the fact that we don't have it.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Universal Discourse, you've been a little quiet on this subject. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, because I lived on that border and worked directly with those detention centers for a long time and refugees, I just wanted to hear what people thought. But I think relevant to what we're talking about here, Biden, it is known that there's usually an increase in immigration when there's a change of presidency. When Trump took office, there was also a spike. It's kind of a pattern that happens. And as Biden said, he'd like to think it was because he was a nice guy, but that's not the case. There's in-country situations, and this is the proper season to travel. He's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
That is the only reason that this is happening. 1% are what you would call children. The rest are older teenagers, which in their communities are adults. So just to get, the context of the situation correct,
Right.
For a conversation about what to do about the border, you either have, a structure with checkpoints, or you keep doing what you do, which is to patrol it. And my cousin was a border patrolman. He's Lakota, and he was the border patrolman on the Tonatam reservation. So we actually got to watch what is involved. And Biden's also right. The vast majority are sent home. The one thing that is a quote, I'm not sure a crisis, but it's kind of scandalous, is as they went to get these children out of these detention centers, the sheer length of time that they'd been held under Trump's sort of regime, And I'm like, it's just more of this. Let's expose how bad that administration was. Biden just, instead of really focusing on what he knows about the border, and because that was one of his programs, he should have had a basket full of data. He just kept referring to how bad the Trump administration was.
And he was promising to do big things like way before the election even happened.
He
and
will.
It's like, well, yeah, he will, but he made it sound like it was a priority, and now it's
That's a good point.
maybe
too.
going to be one.
It is a priority, but then he has to figure out how to, he has to talk about the mess that Trump left when he went away. And when you stand up and say, we have to rebuild everything that was in place that he dismantled.
Yeah, keep in mind, like, there was so much of a mess to clean up. There were tons and tons and tons of children and young adults who got separated from their parents. And then the Biden administration had to come in, like, try to figure out paper trails that didn't exist, and is trying to reunite people with their parents. Like, it's a really bad situation.
Mexico didn't say, yeah, bring him back. They didn't say that. They're not cooperating with that.
A lot of them aren't.
Those are real sensitive issues.
Well, a lot of them aren't even Mexican. It would be wrong to put them in Mexico. It'd just be another.
That's true.
It'd be another, international crime.
The Almo,
but
the Almo administration is very against working with us right now for various reasons. A lot of them, I
they have
believe,
their
are
own immigration
domestic
problems too.
to them. Exactly. Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah,
largely
this is a
domestic
normal
to
thing
them.
that countries deal with a lot.
Zapatistas handled a lot of it because they got their president to go, oh, okay, everybody can come back now. It's fine. And I'm like, yeah, that's working. Also, the Tonatam reservation itself many times stood up and said, we have the space, the resources, and these are relatives of ours. Because they share
That's an
cultural
interesting.
history with northern Mexico. And they said, we don't understand. Why don't you just let us sort of sponsor them so we can bring them here?
I mean, we have 5
The-
bunk
the
beds.
government
Didn't you guys
had
see the
said-
pics?
The government had said, oh, no, you have too many numbers on your reservation if we did that. So
We've got room. We've got 5 bunk beds. I saw that picture getting circulated for like 2 weeks.
I
No,
I,
we're
I
talking
contributed
about
to
the
that.
entire-
Seriously though, there's a point behind that though. Like, what was the point of like? I mean, I don't think it was like neutral parties really pushing for that to get out in the media.
Well,
What was the point of pushing that out if we weren't even ready for what a lot of these same people are calling not a surge, not just a completely normal number?
no, it's a surge, but I think to Universal Discourse's
It's a
point,
normal
she's
surge,
she is
typical
talking
surge.
about a different kind of approach to fixing or potentially
Yeah.
helping fix this issue.
Yeah.
She's
I
talking
know.
about
I'm just
just
saying
make.
the idea
Don't
that we
wanna
don't
get so
have the
lost.
capacity. I mean,
Gotcha.
I'm pretty sure I was just sold that we're good now.
But
Is he saying if it's really just a typical pattern up spike, why are we even going on about it?
No, I'm saying before this this news story happened, like you remember when it was like a trailer with like 5 bunk beds and they're like, look, we're getting the kids out of the cages. It was
Yeah.
a couple
I
weeks
don't
ago. I mean, it was
no,
getting shoved into my news feed all day.
to Mateo's
No.
point, I was one of the people that shared that meme and was like, "Hey guys, we did it! No more cages!" And a bunch of people jumped on it.
Yeah.
Every
So
Bunch of
I wanna-
people jumped on it.
Well, it never made
It's
it
just
to the
that one
human
picture.
rights practice people who were at the border at the time. I wish we had
Well,
known.
of
Yeah,
course
well,
not. It
that
wasn't.
was
For,
nice.
it was.
There's,
It wasn't
there's a
for
gap
the people
between
to know.
slacktivism and
People who make-
activism.
Exactly.
So it's gonna have
People
to
who
jump
make
that gap
decisions
someday.
can't be in. People who make decisions can't be entrusted with information. That sounds really dangerous. They might make different decisions.
Right. Well, in this
No,
case,
but
we're
good-
talking about the fact that the Tonatum are actually the Border Patrol. They're employed as the Border Patrol, and they couldn't understand why, with all their spaces and the resources they actually had, they have a pretty vast territory, were perfectly willing. Why couldn't they have set something up? So
yeah. Well,
maybe
and
that'll be revisited because it's time and somebody might listen to something like that.
Well,
We
I
can
think
hope.
that the
I mean, if it's
administration
sufficient,
seems to be
okay.
learning some lessons, and so this is a thing
That's
that
what
I had.
hoping.
I hope so too. And like I had a buddy who is a lawyer and was working with a project to try to dramatically increase access to legal aid for people who are crossing the southern border.
Yeah,
And
we were doing that.
like he'll from him anyway. I've gotten lots of information about like what the realities are in terms of the legal situation. And these people across the border, many of them are like almost all of them are making asylum claims, right? At least a huge number of them are making asylum claims. So they are coming in here legally. And those asylum claims have to be adjudicated before anything can happen to them. So you have these people who need to have their asylum claims adjudicated. We don't have courts in place. We don't have lawyers in place. So there was some effort, even under the Trump administration, to try novel things. Well, and the Obama administration too, to try novel things like having telejudges, spending more money on legal aid. But in Universal Discourse is bringing up something else. We have entities, tribes, all kinds of different groups that may have new resources to bring and that may have innovative ways of dealing with this situation. And I think that the Biden administration should be looking at them. But as of like right now, I think that they are trying to do that. Like they are trying to make progress and they're trying to improve the situation despite, inheriting a disaster, as we've all said.
No, I think
Tribes
that's a
are
fair
also
point.
sovereign, aren't they considered sovereign? So that might
We're
be
sovereign.
It's
like
supposed to be.
it might be some sort of legal thing they got to work out. Because if
Well,
they
as
have all the room,
as
and
sovereign
it's sufficient-
citizens, as sovereign citizens, we have the right to X. Okay, land back confirmed it. We have the right to X, especially legal issues now. Okay, so because we have a special status, and because immigrants have a special status, the TO in particular have always said, to bring them here with us makes sense because we're related to them. First of all, we understand them. There's many indigenous immigrants that people don't realize are coming from Guatemala, for instance. And we can work with them better, to situate them better, to explain, what they want to, what they've done, what this means, how they're going to do this, the whole process. They're excellent interpreters and mediators, always have been, and they have the land and they actually have the resources. So, like I said, maybe with this administration, that proposal, which has gone up several times, maybe they'll take a really hard, good look at it this time, because to give special status to, do you know what I mean, immigrants, and put them on an area that already has that special status as an intermediary makes total sense. And then the reservation has its own way of carrying its expenses, etc., etc., etc. But it's already doing law enforcement and border patrol for them. So.
I'd be very interested to see how that would play out, and I would very interested to learn more about that universal discourse. So if you have resources that you could share with our community, I would be greatly appreciative of
I
that.
can report to you, because that's who I work with down there. So.
All the same,
from the border.
As long as we can share it with our community and make them a more informed community, that would be great.
Yeah, we'll find out.
Yeah. I just want to say,
go ahead.
Sorry. Well, I was just going to say, there are other things that I think the Biden administration has already hinted at too. I happen to work for a contractor that is predominantly funded by USAID, which is our Agency for International Development, aka our Foreign Aid Office. So I have a bias, but another thing that we need to start looking at is how we can better improve the conditions for people in South America, either by not sticking our fingers in things so much, to say it nicely, and by also dramatically increasing our foreign aid budgets, that we can help improve the conditions for people in South America so that they have no incentive to take the very dangerous journey northward.
That's a very great point, Jason. I appreciate you making that. The biggest drivers to immigration in general is weakened states, and part of those weakened states is caused by the drug war, which I'm sure we'll get into at a later date for our actual podcast, for our podcast. We'll probably end up having to cover that at some point. We did have a comment from Philip Anthony from Facebook, who said, I think some of the extreme positions boil out when groups debate the topic. The vast majority of people want some sort of process to track who comes and goes along the border. And that was in response to us talking about how online and in like social media, you only see both extreme sides and not kind of like the middle or whatever. But yeah, so I thought that was a good point to bring up then as well. Do anybody on the panel want to make a final point about the border crisis before we move on to a different topic?
Yeah. How did we used to confirm whether or not these people were actually with their parents or not? Like, what was? There must have been like a way.
It was a combination of going to the countries of origin for birth records and paternity tests, is my understanding of it.
So in the meantime, would they like still be with their kids, or? So
it depends on what era you're talking about. So when the Obama administration tried to do this,
before
I
Trump.
know, but
before Trump is all I mean.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is like there was different ways that this was tried to address, but the court came through and like smacked it down in different ways for different reasons. So for example, the Obama administration wanted to keep the kids and the parents together inside a facility while they adjudicated the asylum or refugee claim or whatever it was, right? And due to the Flores Agreement in 96, the courts came out and said, you can't keep these kids here for over 30 days. You have to find some place to put them while the parents are waiting a process. And Obama fought that decision and tried to get it overturned on appeal, but lost the appeal.
So before we knew if they were with their parents.
Hold on.
Okay.
So while that was being done, they were kept together inside a single facility together, more or less, and then with watched guards and whatever else you have you at these facilities, and then they would make a determination from there. Oftentimes they do come with IDs, believe it or not. So that was another thing that they would do. But while trying to do that, there was a separation of sorts. being done after the Flores Agreement was the failure to overturn parts of the Flores Agreement during the Obama administration.
Yeah, the reason I ask is just because some of the language that was used, it's like we're separating children from their parents, and I'm always thinking like at some point we probably have to just before we even figure out. I mean, like you said, they have IDs. That's probably a pretty quick way to figure it out.
Yeah,
I'm sure we could contact the Mexican government or Honduran government or something and really confirm it. But I feel like a lot of these people are poor, and I mean, we talk about Americans having trouble getting an ID. So
yeah, they would.
Like that might not be so common.
They would track down birth records and do DNA tests or paternity tests and that sort of thing as well. It all depends on the time. Yeah, sure. They would do if there was reason. If there was reason to suspect that there was if there was reasonable suspicion expect that they were trafficking the children, they would go to the next step of that. Oftentimes, they were also trying to be reunited with family within the U.S. as Universal Discourse, or somebody said, I think it was Universal Discourse said, with the tags on the wrist being phone numbers and stuff. So they would confirm that, or they would have people contacted in the United States and that sort of thing. I think the Flores Agreement itself is a big impediment into doing this correctly. And I would like to see more liberals and leftists take a look at this and analyze it to check me on my knowledge of it, but also to actually reassess the situation on a whole.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question, Mateo?
But this is part of the why I brought up the logistical situation and the legal situation. A lot of this stuff ends up needing to be adjudicated somehow by a judge or by some lawyers. Like when people have documentation that they think even proves that they are, have stewardship of their child, that can take a lot of effort to fix. I also just want to acknowledge, because we didn't bring it up, in general.
Chase, you're breaking up just a tad.
I'm breaking up just a tad?
Yeah, like you're too far away from your mic, maybe.
Okay. Is it still bad?
No, that's good.
Okay. I don't really know what is happening, but so the other thing that I just want to acknowledge is that our immigration laws and our immigration system are seriously problematic. And if we had systems in place that better allowed for migrant work, that better allowed for remittances flows back to home countries, that allowed, unskilled laborers to come in a little bit easier. Like if we made these systems a lot more simple and we got rid of things like visas that are tied strictly to employment. So like if you lose your job, you lose your visa. Like if we fix those things, then I think that dramatically decreases the likelihood that we have crises like these, because things become much more predictable. And I have hopes that the Biden administration is going to try to tackle some of that. It's just really hard to get agreement on it.
I 100% agree with that. A lot of this boils down to the inability for migrants to have temporary work within the United States, because it's what the majority of people crossing the border are looking for. They're looking for economic opportunity or temporary jobs or what have you. And I want to say it was like it was in the 80s. So I don't know. I'm not going to say the exact year, but in the 80s, the temporary work program was basically gutted. They removed they put such a low cap on the amount of temporary workers that could come into the United States. That's when you saw the huge increase of illegal immigration happen, is after they got rid of that.
I was going to say, if you want to cure the problem, open that back up.
Yeah.
Because these are traditional migrant corridors. They've been here for thousands of years. The only reason we have a border is because all the Oklahoma Dust Bowl refugees didn't want to compete. So they pressured.
Yep.
So the Southern California border was cut off, and all these people, 1 million people, were stranded on the other side. The same thing happened to my family twice, 2 different borders. So I mean, realistically, just look at it. They're just coming to work. Just open up the migrant visa.
Yeah, no, like that will solve it.
And then you can take a little bit from the checks, perhaps, to help fund that administrative fee or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
It's stupid. They just want to work.
Art, I think you're muted.
Oh, yeah, you're muted, Art.
Oh, that's right.
I tried to tell him he was muted, but I was.
Nice. It's for our own good, really. Alternatively, we could simply cancel the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo of 1948 and return the border to Mexico, and there we wouldn't have any issue with the border crossing.
True.
Yeah,
True as well.
So there's solutions out there that we could we're just leaving on the table.
That's been proposed before, but Mexico went, no, thank you.
You know what? Honestly, it's just time to make Mexico the 51st state. You know, I wanted to talk
Bring 'em
about
in.
DC
Come on,
today,
good
but
guys.
let's be
Oh,
honest.
really? Is that, are you being ironic? Oh my goodness.
I think it'll actually be easier to make Mexico the 51st state than DC. So
Ask Puerto Rico how they feel about that.
I mean,
yeah. No,
I think that's
No.
this is a great segue to our next topic, actually. So
No.
thank you. But before that, Christina LaRusso, who was on our program last week, said that she both agrees with Chase and Universal about the point of the temporary work visa program. So thank you for that. Now,
That's my whole.
with our next topic, there has been more push for both DC statehood and Puerto Rico statehood happening in Congress and elsewhere. So we should probably talk about that a little bit. Thank you for the segue, Chase.
I'm going to be holding the debate about Puerto Rico. So
Oh, great. What day is that?
whenever people agree to come to it, that's Twitch.
course.
That's the way it is. Usually on
We have the
Saturdays.
same
My
problem.
debates are on Saturdays.
I just want to say right up front, Cypher, that I'm really disappointed in you for being so exclusionary about Guam and the U.S. Virgin Islands. And
I am not exclusionary about it. That's
Someone
y'all,
had to
not
say it.
y'all being in
Y'all.
Congress and everything. Guam needs to be a state. The U.S. Virgin Islands needs to be a state. Every single territory within the United States shouldn't be a territory. It should be a state.
Who's the
Let's be
recent
real. We'd have like 65 or something like that. But yes,
Well,
Who's
go
the
us.
recent congressperson who started talking about Guam like we're wasting money on someone else's country? Just
Uh,
recently.
yeah.
No, that was MJT, I think.
that was
Okay.
that was
That shit
green.
is
That was Taylor
MTG.
Green.
How did I say
Absolutely
MJ?
beautiful.
And MT, shut the fuck up. That's what we should call her. 'Cause nothing out of that woman's mouth is intelligent
No,
whatsoever.
We've
like a
got
cartoon.
it.
It's too
It's
good.
already, it's Saint Fu.
What's that?
Whenever you want to refer to somebody like that, you just call them Saint Fu. STFU.
Saint-
Saint Fu. And then you don't have to be vulgar about it.
Gotcha. Saint Fu. Gotcha.
Saint Catherine Fu. Or
I
whatever.
I have a lot of things. I have a lot of opinions about Magic the Gathering. I don't like it. And I am so glad that Twitter and everybody else is finally waking up to that Hearthstone is better.
But Magic the
Hearthstone is
Gathering was my
better.
jam back in 5th grade, yo.
Just traffic to Pokemon cards.
All of a sudden, like people I know started playing Magic the Gathering. I'm like, I played that in elementary school. I have no idea how to even play anymore.
It's a completely different game. But so statehood. What's going on with it, everybody? What are we going to see a state? Are we not going to see a state?
DC
what's-
becoming its own
Any-
state? It needs to at this point. So, I mean, it's huge. First of all, it has a special function. It's about time. You know.
The main
I'm
push
curious
button-
what the rest of you have to say about it before I say anything.
Well,
I mean,
am I
go ahead,
muted?
Mateo.
Okay, I was about to say I might be muted because I keep saying shit, but then again, I interrupt people all the time, so maybe it's just payback. The main reason why people want statehood for DC is because they want these people who are there to have representation. They pay their taxes. They pay like the highest taxes in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
So they really just want them to have representation, right?
Yeah.
So what if we just split the area up among like Maryland and Virginia? Like,
I
does it
can
have
answer
to be
that
its own
question.
state?
I can answer that question. So
Go for it, Chase.
two things. I'll just be very specific about that. Number one, if you ask anyone in the Republican Party right now what the reason for DC statehood is, it is not because
The
of getting
Republicans.
representation. It's because they say the only reason the Democrats want this is because they want 2 free senators.
That's what actually
80%
started.
Democratic.
That's why I have that question. It's almost like, is there a way to like get them just to shut up about that? Like,
So
split it up
Yeah.
among-
But to answer your specific question, so when DC was originally formed, it was supposed to be made up of land given by both Maryland and Virginia. But Virginia never followed through on their end of the bargain. So all of the land that is now DC was taken from Maryland. Could it return to
Interesting.
Maryland? Yeah. And actually, I think that would be okay. Like I would be okay with that. I will tell you that I live in the DC area. I lived in DC itself for about 3 years. I live a block from the border with DC now. But if you, and so like, and I lived in Wisconsin before that, which I say only because when you talk to people who live in DC and have lived in DC for generations, they don't see themselves as Marylanders. They see themselves as Washingtonians, and they have a distinct culture, and they have a desire to maintain that identity. And
they're
I
not
don't.
they're deaf. You can even by accent.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I just think. I am not one to question that. If people want statehood rather than attempting to rejoin Maryland, then I'm all for it.
No, I think that's
so. I think it's
point.
probably about time. But does that
Go
give
ahead.
them some sort of political advantage? In which case, that's not going to, maybe because of its special function.
Well, it's extra senators and I think congressperson, right?
The original reason that DC is a district rather than a state is because Congress was worried that a state would end up enforcing its own rules upon the federal government and having too much power over the federal government.
Well, you can't, right?
I don't think that's going to be the case anymore, specifically because we've passed. Yeah, not today. Specifically because we've passed a number of different constitutional amendments.
Right.
And
got a standing army now.
We've established. We have a standing army now. We've established federal, for lack of a better term, federal supremacy as far as laws over the country and that sort of thing. So I don't think that's necessarily an issue. However, to be fair, and this is where I need my little Libra emoji here, is that you can make it in such a way where the particular houses of government are all pretty much kind of around the same area. So you can still have exclusive federal jurisdiction over those areas, like that we kind of have with federal government courthouses and that sort of thing. Yeah. So there's no reason why that should be a fear there anymore.
I think they should have a state, but with where the Capitol Square, where that whole section is, that should be kept a district, a special district.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
And that's what the proposal actually is for Congress to resize the District of Columbia, to shrink it, and then allow the actual city to become a state.
Yeah. And that would be the best course of action here.
It'd be like the Vatican,
in my opinion. Yeah. No, exactly. Great kind of.
Would there still be citizens living in the newly formed DC spot? Because then that's not solving the problem. That's just
because they always have. So their taxation, they're all.
I think Mateo's saying Mateo's issues.
After they just annexed. They've been doing that forever. They go back and forth. Once they built the Beltway and it all went, it's not a problem. They just change the sign. Like the paperwork's already behind it all. It won't be a problem. It's not like anybody can go anywhere. I don't know if you've been to DC lately.
No, I think what Mateo is getting at is that if there are still people that are like in apartment buildings or whatever that are inside the district area, that they would still be taxed and not have representation. That can be solved by excluding any kind of residential housing from said jurisdiction.
No, you don't need to. You already have how many people with IDs that say resident of District of Columbia, born in District of Columbia. You just shrink that number that number would just go down. You wouldn't have to do anything.
But then they would still run up against the issue of them not having actual direct representation. So you could exclude those kind of issues.
This is like a very weird thing.
This is a weedy topic.
How do they have
You're talking about making like the National Mall and the White House and all the Capitol and all the related buildings. Like nobody is going to live in those places except for hypothetically the president and their family.
Correct.
Now there's an interesting constitutional question about there are 3 electoral votes because of the 23rd Amendment that are assigned to DC.
Yeah.
So the DC has 3 electoral votes. So if we do this, does that mean that whoever the incumbent president is and their family just get 3 electoral votes? Because that's kind of a funny weird outcome. But I don't know. There's a bunch of misconceptions about it too. Like people think that people in DC don't pay federal taxes. Yeah. Everyone who lives and works in DC pays federal taxes, but they do not have a vote in either the House or the Senate. Honestly, even if you just made the delegate in the House a voting rep, that would go a really long way to allowing people to actually have some representation. Yeah. And I also get really annoyed when people say, it's 80% Democrat. Listen, when you say Democrat, there's a wide spectrum. You know, Joe Manchin to AOC, there's a really wide spectrum. And you want to know who the most popular and most recent big politician in DC is? It's Muriel Bowser, who is incredibly pro-business, fairly conservative, especially economically conservative. Like, she is very much to one side of things. So you might say, like, oh, DC's just going to elect Democrats to Congress, and maybe because it overwhelmingly votes Democrat, but that spectrum is very wide, and this isn't like some crazy leftist city that it is painted as on the right.
Well, everybody to the left of Trump is now a communist, though. So,
I mean, I think Bernie Sanders represents a really far wing of the Democratic Party, and he had no problem coming right over and voting right in line with Democrats for the presidency. That's, I think, where their concern is.
For sure.
Like, they're going to be Democrats. They're professional Democrats. It's like they do have a lot of disagreements, but at the end of the day, it's still going to be a net positive for Dems.
Yeah.
Like, by
sure.
I mean, a pretty predictable amount, I would probably guess.
No, DC in reality is incredibly conservative.
It must be.
I don't know who's voting and claiming that representative of DC, but it's not.
Are you trying to say something? Because I see your mouth moving, but I don't know if you're on a call separate from this or not.
I left myself muted again, as I do. No, I was just going to say that, like, you know, we can make the argument that, like, you know, well, Joe Manchin is, you know, a different animal than, you know, Bernie Sanders. Okay, true. But in terms of having that control of, you know, any given chamber, once you get past that, you know, majority, suddenly you are in charge of the committees. You know, decide assignments. You decide what bills get heard, what bills don't get heard. There's a massive amount of power, even to having somebody who's just a single pinky toe into your party. If that's where they are on the line, then that shifts the entire balance of power of the entire government. Like, it's a massive shift of even having two Democrats, even having two more Joe Manchins would be just a sea change in the balance of power that, you know, and this is just another thing which is interesting, is that the way that we arrange states, if you think about it, you know, it's the most bizarre, haphazard thing ever. We started off where this armed revolution, where we just kind of had this real estate that the old maps of the 13 colonies and the land that they wanted, like, a lot of times nothing to do with what we see today. And then as we moved across the country, like what I'd mentioned earlier, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, what is funny is in our war with Mexico, President Polk sent down, the military with the issue with Texas and all that. And the Secretary of State had a ambassador, I think his name was Frisk or Trist or something. And he was down there getting conflicting advice from Congress, who did not want to annex any of Mexico, and the president, who wanted to annex all of Mexico. And so he kept getting these conflicting messages. They were there for 6 weeks. And eventually he drew up the treaty where he took half of Mexico. And he came back and everybody hated him. It was like one of the most hated, compromises of all time. But this is literally how we wound up with the western half of the United States, rather than taking all of Mexico or none of Mexico. And we've continued this really bizarre, just way of coming up with states that's completely haphazard. I mean, just, it has almost nothing to do with like what the locals would like. You think about like California. Should we split it up into 6 states, 3 states, 2 states? One massive mega state, whereas the rest of the East Coast is like you drive 5 minutes and you're across 3 different states. Like, it's just, it really, there's no rhyme or reason to it, other than, now we're just locked into this weird balance of power thing where, like, nobody cares what the locals want. This is all about how it affects things nationally. It's a really, like, when you think about it, it was not a great system 250 years ago, and now this is just bizarre. It's just, frankly, it's just, even us pretending like there's some point to it, it's just a really weird system that's just we're kind of stuck with.
That's a very great point, Art, because I've read different Democratic operatives come up and say that they want to do things like split California up into 4 states, where they make the San Francisco Bay Area one state, LA one state, and then I think it's like another part of Southern California into one state, and then give the conservatives all of Northern California, basically.
There's several ways. I mean, if you go a little bit inland, like Riverside, River Tucky, as we affectionately call it. I mean, you just have, literally, I mean, I'd be happy any number of ways you could cut the state up. But, like, why does Rhode Island, which has a smaller population than the county that I live in, why do they get 2 senators? Like, it makes no sense at all. Like, why can't Orange County be its own state? Like, we're bigger than Rhode Island. We've got more people. Like, why do they get to be a state? Like, it doesn't make any sense. But this is just this weird, like, legacy thing that we've been saddled with for centuries.
The territorial distribution of states is very strange, and I would like to see this topic explored more. Please, Chase, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, it would be one thing if it were just the Senate. Like, if just the Senate was the thing that, like, balanced things towards, like, state entities and was, like, counter-populist, fine, great. But it's not just the Senate. It's the Senate. It's the Electoral College. It's the filibuster. It's gerrymandering. Like, we have a bunch of things that all compound in order to help the currently the Republican Party. It's not always that way, but currently the Republican Party. And that's really frustrating. And like, I'd be lying if I didn't say that, like, yeah, part of the reason I'd like DC statehood is that we're just offsetting that balance just a little tiny bit. But I think that we get lost in the conversation and we forget that what we're talking about is 700,000 people, predominantly people of color, who work and pay federal taxes and do not have a vote. And that sucks. And that's not the same situation, by the way, in Puerto Rico or Guam or these other places. They usually aren't paying federal taxes. But in DC, they are. And to not have a vote in Congress when you're paying federal taxes is wrong and just un-American, and we have to fix it. We have to. It's like a moral imperative, in my opinion.
100% agree with that, Chase. Does anybody want to make another comment on this topic before we move on to another one?
Yeah. Let's say like the fastest track to getting those voters representation was actually splitting it up among like Virginia and the other state that borders it. Would you guys push back against that, or would you be very happy that those people are going to have representation?
Ooh, it's a good question. I'd personally be happy with it because it's really not about the power balance for me between the two parties, because to fix that, you need a whole host of other different changes that doesn't have anything to do with state representation. As far as way to shut Republicans up too.
Like, not shut them up, but like just be like, well, now what do your concerns aren't that big of a deal.
But then Maryland gets more congressional members, and so does Virginia, and all those congressional members will be Democrat anyway. So
probably, yeah, that's the thing. Like, I mean, it's still gonna happen like naturally. So like, if that'll probably be the easiest way just to get it.
It would be an improvement, absolutely. But I mean, there's no question. It would just get them to the same state that the rest of us are in, where we're just arbitrarily stuck in these states that we really can't modify. I mean, not in any reasonable sense.
Well, I'd like to see the different kind of ways that we could go about fixing this from like a do-over kind of perspective, but I think that's outside of the scope of this cast. So if anybody wants to talk about that later, we sure should.
I just Googled it really quick. Rhode Island was founded by a guy named Roger Williams. He was banished from the Massachusetts colony for advocating religious tolerance and separation of church and state. So actually, I guess Rhode Island, there's a good reason for that. I mean, not anymore, obviously, but it's just like,
wow, I have a newfound hatred towards Massachusetts. Wow.
I thought it would be the opposite. I figured it was going to be like a slavery thing. It's like, you can't have slaves. And he's like, I'm forming my own state. Instead, it's like, actually,
that's how some states got formed, though.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I just
assumed technically got plantation in the name.
Yeah, the Providence Plantation. It's such a weird name.
Even Kansas, I mean, whether or not it was going to be a slave state was one of the things that led to the Civil War.
Bloody Kansas, man. I want to make a video game based on that, honestly. It'd be great motif.
Like a fighting game and like...
Nah, like a Fallout style.
I'm kidding.
Western thing, but yeah. Okay, so as people might be aware, we are doing a new segment called News in the Weird, where we cover a weird story of the news from different states. We're going to try to cover all 50 states before looping back around and doing it all over again. So be tuned to check out these live episodes in order to figure out what that is. This story comes from Art Black, who shared it in our Facebook community. And this story is about a Texas man, 22, forced at gunpoint to get his girlfriend's name tattooed on his neck before being shot dead and dumped in a drainage ditch. So this story is very bizarre. This is one of those kind of things that you hear about happening every once in a great while, but it has some politics stuff attached to it. Art, since you shared this story, do you want to get into some of the details? And would you like me to share the article on the screen?
Sure.
I'm just going to sit back and smoke and listen to this one.
All right. So give me 1 second while I get this.
I'm
story.
interested to hear what you think the political angle is here, but no, it's
We already know what it is.
oh well, it's more of a. Well, I mean, I guess there's some morals of the story, but socially, it's interesting. I mean, long story short, the guy, he's at a late night tattoo sesh at his girlfriend's place, and I guess they get in an argument. She accuses him of seeing other women. Conversation doesn't go well, so 4 of her boys show up with guns, and they hold him down. One of the guy grabs the tattoo gun and starts getting creative on him, and then they at gunpoint make the tattoo artist go back and tattoo her name on his neck. So I feel at that point you're a little bit beyond counseling or any kind of relationship therapy. That's things have probably gotten pretty bad. So then they drag him off. She says, whatever you do to him, don't do it here. So they take him out into the desert, kick him out of the car, shoot him in the neck. And I got to say, like, especially just having some work done. I mean, the artist put a lot of effort into getting her name in there in a very rushed job. And I don't know, maybe they realized that maybe tattooing, the name of the person who had him killed on the dead body wouldn't be great. So I guess they tried to shoot him there to maybe cover it up, and left him for dead. And but people talk. This is why, unfortunately, you can't leave witnesses. The tattoo artist, the police rolled him up, and he got chatty. So,
I mean, of course he got chatty because he was like, why wouldn't he, right? So,
yeah.
But one of the political things about this, and I am not saying this is my position. This is the chatter that has been shown on social media while sharing this article, is that the 3 men involved got charged with murder, but the woman did not. So based on this story, based on Art's kind of recap of it, does that make any sense to this? Or should she eventually get charged with murder? And does that say anything else larger about the situation?
From what I heard so far, it sounds like she didn't commit murder. I mean, it doesn't mean she didn't. It just means we don't know, at least. Like, she said, whatever you do, don't do it here, right? She could have, I mean, maybe she might murder him, but she's not going to say that, and her lawyer's not going to advise her to say that.
Yeah,
so
we're
going to have to find something.
Rough him up or take him home or have a stern talking to him or
just because I mean, she may have murdered him, but proving it's going to be a little difficult.
Now they did him in the balls until he can't have kids anymore.
They did get her on aggravated kidnapping and assault with a deadly weapon, or no, it was some kind of assault or disfigurement or something, whatever. Because
definitely kidnapping,
yeah. So I mean, they got her for some pretty tough crimes, but. Yeah,
Perez, the woman involved. Oh, sorry, I just accidentally. Has been charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, aggravated kidnapping, filing a false police report, and failure to report a felony. So she got smacked with everything that they could 100% prove at the time with it, since she didn't.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Because
that's all we can do.
Yeah, but that one about the false police report, they the family, I guess, came by her house looking for the the boyfriend. And she called the police on them and put a report in for harassment.
Yeah, for his family harassing her
on the family. Yeah. So, yeah.
Must have been a really good relationship.
Anyway, Erica, if you're listening, I just want to put out there that you sound delightful, and I really wish that your boyfriend had respected your wishes for monogamy. So,
oh my God.
Yeah, she's big on morals.
Right.
Crossing line.
So we're cool, right? Right? Okay. Nobody here is talking shit about you. Just to be perfectly clear, we're just,
I mean, I'm the one that has to worry about this happening in Texas. So
yeah, you're fucked.
Yeah. Chase, you had something you wanted to say.
Well, I was just trying to think, like, okay, I don't think any DA is not going to charge somebody in a case like this because they're a woman, because it's obviously going to get notoriety and it's going to be scrutinized. So the DA has every incentive to charge them with everything that they think could stick. The only reason that I was hesitant, like the only reason that I was like thinking about maybe there's something weird is because of the felony murder rule, where if you're committing a felony and then somebody dies in relation to you committing that felony, you can be charged with murder. But the link, and she did certainly commit felonies and like is being charged with them. So why not try to make that stick? I guess it may just be too tenuous of a link. Like it wasn't directly a death as a direct result of her.
They could have been maybe
felony,
two separate crimes because of like the time or what happened in between.
That could be it too.
Something
like there is a cooling off period that in law for these kind of things at times.
Possibly. I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know. I'm just guessing.
But I mean, you could very easily argue that she did not intend for him to die. And and as far as reasonable doubt, like I actually don't know that. I mean, I certainly wouldn't doubt it, but also as far as like, I would believe it either way. But the fact that I could believe it either way means that I have reasonable doubts either way.
Yeah,
for sure.
Exactly.
No, I can agree with that. I do find it kind of interesting that we can have this kind of conversation about these things just because of how the law works. We do have a comment coming in through Christina on Facebook saying, the thing is, if they overcharge, it could lead to a walk for her, see Casey Anthony, which is also another point that was brought up in our broader community about this case, where we were talking about this through various groups that we interact with. So thank you, Christina, for making that point. Universal Discourse, you've been silent. Do you not want to, do you have any thoughts?
You can't really, you may at most like charge her with accessory, but then you'd have to prove forethought, and it looked like, as they classify it, a crime of passion. So I think that's why they didn't do it, but they did try to get her on everything, because now they have to, how is the relationship between you and these three thugs in the first place?
That was, that's a good point as well. I am curious to find out whether or not these four people were relatives, old friends, or if she runs her own crew. And I think that will make a determination whether or not
she was cheating on him with all
of them. No, dude, that's
if they're really good at kidnapping people and dumping them in the desert, there's probably a bunch more bones out there. So most likely one of them is wanted or under surveillance. Or anyway,
I don't like that one.
Doesn't sound like they're that good.
Cook that up as a good idea on a Thursday.
Wow.
I think you have to not get caught to be good at that job, but
correct.
Exactly. Exactly.
Your luck runs out eventually.
Yeah,
it's true.
Well, these guys were like 21, so I don't think they had much of a run.
Well, you never know.
If they were involved in gangs
early.
In the movie version, they're at least 35. Okay, they're like,
and their names are all Paco and Jose and stupid shit. No. They call each other Cabron, like in the movies. But no, they could have been gang. You don't know. There's not enough detail.
So I'm curious to figure that stuff out too.
I had a weird one too. I'm not sure weird, but it's pretty gross. From Britain, that somebody sent me today.
No, you want
to? That I saw.
Chase, if you want to finish the
no. I was just gonna say the tattoo part of it is just like the weird thing. Like that is, I don't know what you're working through with that.
What's that?
Right.
That's like seriously extremist. Like, okay, say my name.
Oh, absolutely.
Say my name.
Absolutely.
Say my name.
Yeah. You're never gonna forget me.
Well, if you liked it, then you should have put a ring on it.
She could even argue that. Actually, she could be like, "Well, why would I make him put a tattoo on him if I thought they're gonna kill him?"
True. Maybe.
If I was
she's actually
working for her.
Oh, that's just a really aggressive kiss of death right there. It's a parting gift.
Say my name.
Right? Yeah, it is.
That's awful. Like,
it's really bad. Anyway, you guys wanted to have a news of the weird segment. Here we go.
We have another. It's been super dark.
Another weird
the first one was like a mom bullying like teen girls. This one was horrible. A murder. We got to get some really happy weird news next time. So
okay.
We have to go to Florida, but Florida has to come in.
That's
last,
all sad news.
I got that Florida story if you want it. Well,
no. I think we should go with Universal Discourse's story. She put it up in our private chat. So Uni, I haven't got a chance to read this yet. If you want to go ahead and do the recap.
It was I was sent this morning. A British teenager was murdered. She reported a stalker 5 times prior to this. The police fined her for wasting their time.
Oof.
She got fined and then murdered.
Wait, what happened?
So yeah, just go ahead and read the news story quickly, Mateo, to get a better grasp of it. This sounds very. This is social political here as well.
Shanna Grice, 19 years old, murdered by Michael Lane in Brighton. It was featured in the Sky Crime documentary Murder in Slow Motion. Grice met Lane while working at a fire alarm. They had a relationship. Grice ended it. Lane became volatile and aggressive, continued to stalk her, sent her flowers, slashed her car, broke into her home, targeted her boyfriend, went with, hypertext. She reported Lane to the Sussex police 5 times in 6 months. They dismissed it, and they even fined her NZ $175 for wasting the police's time because she failed to disclose they had been in a relationship. And in August, this is actually a while ago, but Lane waits till Grice was home alone, murdered her, and set fire to her bedroom. A judge condemned the police, but it was too late. So, if you're in a relationship with somebody and they stalk you in England, you're up shit's creek.
That's a horrible story.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
It's just weird because it's just extraordinary and unbelievable, especially coming from Britain. That's the kind of thing you'd expect in the South like 30 years ago.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Art, you're muted.
Sorry, Britain can be kind of hit or miss. I realized as soon as I started talking, I realized that. Britain can be kind of hit or miss in terms of social policy.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, that's it is. It is what, Turf Island as well.
I mean,
right.
I mean, certainly this isn't a result of like a policy, though, right?
I think it's because she failed to disclose something, and they just took it as like lying or something. I'm not sure.
Well,
they got the right to fine you for doing this.
It's hard to know for sure. Like what happened here? Is it that the police are under resourced and like don't have the investigative capacity to do this? Is it just one cop being an idiot? Like certainly there isn't a policy in place to, at least at the national level, like make it so that this is okay or kind of thing that happened. But like, really is there? Sad story, I'm trying to think. Yeah, it is. It's like incredibly sad. But like, is there a lesson to be learned? And what is that lesson? Is it the common thing that people just often don't believe women when they are the subject of abuse?
Yeah,
I would say yes.
It's more like police, especially I remember in the South, would always say they refused to get involved with a domestic dispute. They'd show up and maybe they'd separate you, and then they just let the guy go right back in.
Yeah,
they had this hands off approach.
It kind of reminds me of the story that I read a while back. There is actually, I believe it's a Netflix documentary or series, I don't know which, about it. It was called let me double check the title on that. So it's an unbelievable story of rape. And essentially what happened in that situation is that this woman who was at the time just getting out of foster care, getting set up on her own place, because what states often do with foster care children, was raped in her room at night. And nobody, including her foster mother, who she was very close with, believed it at the time.
Yeah, it's called unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think it plays into that a bit, where in police culture, I clearly it's partly in UK from this story. I would say we can't make it a thing nationally, like Chase was saying, but I think it's clear in this case where women just aren't believed necessarily. The UK had an issue with that, with the grooming gangs, where a lot of the teenage girls were not believed because of their socioeconomic status and general idea of girls being able to make these kind of decisions on their own and then regretting them and that sort of thing. So I could see that playing in here. And if there's a lesson to be learned, it's believe women, right? Like it just goes back down to that. Like believe, trust, and verify, right? So
there was this was several decades ago, a really feminist pushback against a man who was a serial killer. And I hate that I can't remember it. But it was like really astonishing that the social outcome was immediately it was, well, women clearly can't be going out alone, so now we have to go and escort them. Well, we don't really want to escort them, so we'll just tell them to stay home and not go to the pub, when the pub is the actual heart of British society. The women themselves got so angry, they did a march, and they pressured, and they kept pushing. And they said, the problem isn't that we need to stay home. The problem is you need to catch him. You do your job. You need to make this place safe. But the immediate, even the police, the government, the county, everything, or whatever the hell however they're put together, immediately it was like, stay home, girls, stay home. And the women went, no, do your job. We're not going to stay home. And they took back the night. And the guy was caught. He wasn't caught when the women were sort of quarantined. Like, so there was this whole, it's clear that the attitude is the women are dictated to. They're dismissed. They're to be protected, et cetera, et cetera. You know, they're except for when they actually complain, and then it's just shut up and go away. You know, I think that in Sussex in particular, that's still a prevailing attitude. It's identical to American South, which is where most Southerners came from, by the way. Sussex and Essex, anyway, I don't know. It's just a prevailing attitude. They haven't changed. So
it's
it was extraordinary what they did, though, when they literally took back the night. Literally.
Yeah.
I never expected, I never saw that coming, you know. When I saw what they'd done, I was like, oh. They didn't run away in fear. They took it back. Yeah.
It's just really strange that you have the police, which, you know, and law enforcement in studies have found to have like 24 to 40% of, you know, just self-reported, you know, families with law enforcement in them have domestic violence, you know, taking place in them. So that's just, you know, what we know about.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the, you know, national rates, you know, more like 10%, I guess. It's just really weird that an industry that has this overwhelming amount of it seems to not take the problem very seriously.
That's true too.
No, it's really not. It's probably actually, you know, very, very understandable. So it's just, it's a problem that needs to get addressed, and it's needed to be addressed for a very long time. And we're very slow about it because a lot of people within the system maybe have guilty consciences and don't necessarily want this looked at too closely.
That I can agree with as well.
Biased, I guess. Well, it shows that UK they need to reform their police department too, I guess.
I think it's a kind of a global issue.
Perhaps even give them less funds. They could less fund
less
the police
funds to do even less than they do.
Yeah.
Oh,
well, you can take those less funds and put those funds somewhere else towards people that are better equipped and trained to handle certain types of problems that maybe you don't need.
Somewhere that's being tried. I forget where. Damn it! It's actually like there are certain things that, you know, like the reasonable things that we would expect, like cops to maybe be overkill for. They have like it's a city somewhere. I can't remember who's doing it.
Austin's doing. They took some of the police budget. They took some of the police
certain it's
budget
Austin.
from
I thought it
Austin
was in the south
to give to homeless relocation, or not relocation. That makes it sound bad. I'm sorry.
Oh, never mind.
So,
Oh shit!
So sorry.
They created an actual like force of people, or not a force, but you know, they're not going to be driving around in like V8 Explorers. They probably got like Priuses, but they
Right.
more like domestic violence calls, just things where you should.
It was
probably
social
make a
workers,
step,
right?
basically social workers,
Yeah.
but they're active and they're going out to calls that we used to have police go after, or we still do, but I forget where it is. It's somewhere in the South. I thought it was Texas.
It could be, but I do know what you're talking about. I can say that Austin is doing or has on the ballot several of these kind of things as well. On the Less Ballot initiative, they had taking a portion of the police budget that they estimated is for homeless, dealing with homelessness, and dealing with homelessness for police is arresting them, criminalizing homelessness, and putting that money to buy a hotel in order to increase the capacity to actually get the homeless people the services they need to get reintegrated back into society.
That's a good use of government funds. Like a lot of people are always like, let's tax some fucking dude and then we'll pay for it. It's like, sure, but we should just focus on the government actually building it first. Because, well, if it's federal, if it's state, of course, it's different. But it's almost always framed as like we got to just like tax rich people. Instead, it's like the government could easily just build houses for these people. Find a way to do it and just push for that. Like
It reduces
right.
crime.
I mean, that's what happened in the 30s, right? To deal with the homeless population, to deal with the homeless issue caused by the Great Dust Bowl and migrations and depression. So
housing first as a solution to people experiencing a lack of housing seems really obvious, but and people are trying to do it. People are trying to do it. DC is trying to do it. It's just really, really, really expensive. Even if you set the cost aside, no, the NIMBY crowd, the not in my backyard crowd, are really strong with that because,
which is why it's expensive.
Yeah, which is
right.
It's not as expensive. But like, you need to have like, most of the people who I've met and spoken to are experiencing homelessness are, they also have mental health issues. They need help. Yeah. Like, they are not only really under resourced, but they have like been in a bad situation for long enough that they need a lot of help to like almost reintegrate effectively and get back to being safe and productive member of society. Like, it's really hard and it takes a lot.
That's very true. I think we'd be remiss to not talk about this comment from Christina again. Women are expected to hide so that men can control themselves, not to harm women. Women have to dress a certain way so as not to be raped. When do men hold themselves accountable for their actions and aggressions toward women? So I think we would be remiss not to bring this up as kind of a rebuttal to these kind of social mores that have been part of society at large, not just the U.S., but around the world. There's a term for it, right? Is it patriarchy? I think. For those kind of things, and it's something that globally we're coming to have to deal with.
There is some kind of weird and funny news that I could maybe would lighten things up.
Hang on. I want to acknowledge I'm glad you steered us back to this, Cypher, because I am cautiously optimistic that the culture is shifting around this and that we are increasingly adopting an empathetic and victim point of view when it comes to assessing these situations. So we are to the point that sometimes I think we have a hair trigger about certain things, but it is not perfect. It is not institutionalized. It is not being practiced by everybody who is enforcing the laws or responding to things and yada, yada, yada. And certainly not in every workplace and not in every family. But we are trending in the direction of adopting an empathetic, victim-oriented point of view. And we are getting further and further away from women have to change. No, it's the men who are terrible in this example. And
I think you're taking it way past where it should be to the extreme by saying the men. Men are carrying this out, but to be hold men accountable, that's so broad in general. There's a lot of men who don't have anything to do with this stuff. That's the same thing as saying hold black people accountable. Look at this crime, it's a weird generalization that's not ever going to help anyone move toward where we all say we want to go.
So would you say it's some men, but not all men?
I mean, literally, yes, but I get the funny joke you're making.
I just had to meme. That's all.
I mean,
no, but I think just to interject really quick, the idea when you talk about culture is that we're all part of a culture, and what bad people can get away with is a lot of times informed by what good people tolerate. So in certain cultural contexts where you're taught to not really get involved or say anything or let certain things slide, then people who can be perfectly good can let perfectly bad things happen by the fact that we're conditioned to be permissive. So just by changing culture, you can change the aggregate effect without necessarily being a different person yourself. Like a lot of people aren't personally abusers, but
most are most likely.
Yeah, I would say most
people. It's just a weird category to be like, yeah, men shape up. Like, yeah, we'll take it to the CEO of men. And we'll have him run it through the.
But you see what I'm saying is that by changing the culture, like that doesn't mean that like me.
I'm just saying that framing really just irks me. It's
I also want to say.
And
I
any
was
other
not explicitly saying.
Hold on, time out. Everybody's talking over each other. Okay, so Mateo, could you finish?
Well, no, Chase.
Finish your thing.
Okay,
Chase, go ahead.
All I was going to say is like I was really just saying in this instance where people are saying. Per the question, like, women need to dress differently. Women need to do this. I was referencing that example and saying, in this instance, like, we should not be telling generic women to change their behavior. If anything, we should be telling the men to change their behavior. And that's why I was saying,
and lesbian women, you gotta.
That's true. That's true.
And
be folks
and that's serious in a way too.
Who are attracted to femme presentation, and other categories that we're excluding. But I'm just saying, like, we are getting better as a culture about not trying to force the victims of something to change, and instead focusing on the perpetrators, which is where our ire should be. And in social groups, we need to hold each other accountable, and yada yada yada.
Art, you go ahead and make your point, and then I will cap this off.
I think it's nothing more than that. It's just social groups. Like, you can go from me saying, well, like, when I fly in the airlines, I don't slap the airline stewardess's ass. Like, that's true, and no matter whether the culture gets more or less, that's just going to be me. But in cultures where it was more permissive, you could still not do it, and it could still be a bad culture overall. Yeah. So I think that, and I was joking earlier about the not all men thing, because it's, that seems to be a comeback that's prompted by some people who feel like kind of personally called out. But I think the
immutable characteristics that we normally, under any other circumstance, would avoid.
Yeah, because
the reason is good to avoid them, I would say.
Yeah, it does have a bit of an essentialist kind of an undertone to it, but I think that it's more constructive to not look at it like that and look at it as the culture of man, not the men themselves. And I think that the way you're right, the way that it's framed makes it sound like it's the men, whereas it's really more of just our culture. So
and I'm not just trying to be annoying either. Like, it's.
No. I mean, it's a valid point. It's a cultural context that we exist in. That while we say what men do, but really we're just talking about male culture. So it's fair to point out that the framing should be more precise, because it should not be framed as an essentialist attack on men, because that's not productive or good.
I mean, men
I agree.
Most murders too.
You fellas are so touchy.
Yeah, we are.
It's like men commit most murders too, so we should just might as well be like, men.
You're like, wait a minute,
please.
Wait a minute.
No,
I don't know him.
Okay.
He did it. Not me.
Right.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can you imagine, like, if people got this upset about me saying it? Can you imagine if Universal Discourse had said it? I mean, come on.
I've had that. What are you talking? What, try being indigenous and say
women.
that.
What's up with it?
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Look, everybody's gonna.
Shit.
Whoa.
Hit the bulls.
Wow.
Sorry, I accidentally hit the wrong button trying to maximize you. Could you repeat your point?
Just
Me?
another man sounds
Yes.
like women.
Yeah.
Pick a category. Somebody's going to make a giant dartboard out of it and go for the bullseye. It really doesn't matter. Somebody's going to find issue with any kind of perspective you put out. As a man,
I think that's true too. Yeah.
It doesn't really matter, because now that kind of thing is gamified. But yeah,
Generalizing behavior over an entire gender or sex. It's like, it's
Culture. It's I think
we have it all the time. Indigenous people. We're not all related. We don't. Most of us hate each other. We can't speak for each other. But there's always one person who waves that flag and says, "I speak for all," whatever.
Right.
And I'm like, God, we don't even know you right now, man. Put that down. You're making us look so bad. Jesus, God, who invited him? Fuck. Show me your card, brah. Shit. I want to see your quantum. Went degree. Don't know you right now. So it happens all the time. It's that bad cousin at the barbecue.
Everybody's got that uncle, right?
We all got to pay for that one guy, right?
That's how I feel about men.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
To kind of cap this off, Christina also made a good point. Good men have to hold bad men accountable, and this is what I wanted to show what we're what Mateo and Art were kind of talking about, but kind of slightly past each other. And believe it or not, the military has gotten better at creating a culture around intervention. And it's the kind of thing with this is that, hey, these are the things that they use, the things that lead up to a potential rape, right? And they're saying, hey, you see the girl over there, she's being fed drinks and looks uncomfortable. Would you intervene now? Yes or no? And a lot of people are like, no. And then it shows like the next step of this, and they're like, would you intervene now? Yes or no? And it keeps going. And it's these little like military training exercise things. And to be fair, I got out in 2018, so I don't know how much better these got since then, or if they got worse. But this is my experience, and I think that's kind of what Art was actually talking about here, is trying to like focus in on these things that we can do collectively that actually will help mitigate these instances. And correct me if I'm wrong, Art, if you're not going that way or not.
No, I think that people are products of our culture, and a lot of times what we think is acceptable behavior that we came up with on our own. Like most people have no appreciation of the effect that we're molded by our surroundings, our circumstances, and our conditioning. And that's it. I'm just, if you want to change the gross outcomes from everything, and I mean that in terms of, the net effect, then you just change the parameters of, people's cultural, paradigm and what they're allowed to do, and, what their taboos are and all that. Really, humans are super, super morally flexible to a very disturbing degree. But, that just means it's just something that we need to kind of be aware of and make sure that, we set the constraints where we want them. And there's a reason why the constraints were so lax in terms of men and women in the past, whereas male-dominated societies. It's because that's the way men wanted it. And I say men not as an inherent function of us, but just as the culture that we were able to kind of just create. So we just create a new culture. That's all we got to do.
Okay.
Yep. Does anybody want to make a final comment about this?
No.
Can I give the short, funny good news just to cheer everybody up?
Oh, yeah.
Let's do
Y'all
that.
remember the Asian grandmother who got punched?
Yeah.
She picked up a plank and whooped that boy's ass. So he was sitting there going, I don't know what happened. They raised $1 million for her. She's donated it for a nonprofit devoted to anti-Asian racism and violence. She never kept $1.
That's
They've
awesome.
just gotten $1 million donation from her. But what was glorious is the way she whooped his ass.
Is there a video of it? I never actually got to see it.
It's all over everything.
Yeah. The only video I saw, is there more? Because what I saw was the aftermath.
After
which was
effect,
her like with like a 2x4 and like waving it around, and then it just pans over to this guy who's getting carted away on a gurney.
Yeah, it was. Well, it was.
That's what it really looked like to me. That she beat his ass with a cricket bat. So.
She grabbed a loose plank and came across his face, split his face. It took him down.
That's pretty funny.
And he was looking like, what hit me? I said, an 87-year-old Asian grandmother hit you. That Tai Chi paid off.
Based stick woman.
Champ. Based stick woman. Pog of the evening. There it is. We found her. Stickman's wife. Stickman's granny.
Oh no, God no! That's not a relationship we want to. That's not something we want to ship.
We don't want to ship that one. Yeah, that's a twist that's a 2020 twist, not a 2021 twist.
Although that wouldn't be uncommon. And damn, I shouldn't have said that.
But she donated all the money, and she will continue to donate money. So that was marvelous.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's a good.
So there is weird and good. Yeah.
There is weird and good.
Don't mess with an 87-year-old grandmother.
I was about to say like what a wholesome story, but then like I have to remember that this is like entire story came out of like a crime being committed against this woman.
Yeah, right. Yeah, random hate crime.
She was the second one he hit.
Damn.
That day or
Yeah.
just in general?
Yes, that day.
Didn't know that.
Jesus fuck.
Well, and the last.
Yeah,
There.
And the last.
True.
big true. All right.
Poor woman.
The only other story that I kind of wanted to cover, it's another depressing story because it's the news
Oh,
and
God.
all
I
things.
tried to
related
lift you
depressing.
up, you guys.
We
But
gotta-
we're not
we
going to
gotta
cover it.
steer the
We'll
audience
cover
a
it
little better.
next week.
Trying to depress them all.
We'll cover it next week because we have been live for almost 2 hours now. So does anybody have any final thoughts about any of the subjects that we talked about this evening before we go ahead and call it a day, or have anything they want to add and talk about?
Just really quick. Naked woman pulled from Florida storm drain says she was trapped for 3 weeks.
There you go.
The woman told police that she went for a swim in the West Del Rey Canal on March 3rd. When she opened a door that guided her to a chain of tunnels. After going through multiple tunnels, the woman got lost and couldn't navigate her way back. She was found on Tuesday after a passerby heard the woman yelling from a sewer and called 911. She was missing for 20 days.
Okay.
Oh,
my
I have
God.
another breaking news story from 2 days ago that we didn't touch on. This was published
what's
by
up?
the Fox News channel. I'll just read the headline for you. Taco Bell hot sauce packets, which are usually free, are now a hot commodity on eBay. Listings range from $10 up to thousands of dollars.
See, that's good weird news
Wait, why?
because people
I'm
are just crazy with collectibles. It's like the new
Oh,
thing.
dude.
I'm
That's
surprised
Szechuan
not-
sauce.
Yeah. Oh, actually, that is rare. That is
That
rare.
one's actually rare. So
Szechuan
I can see
sauce,
that.
yeah.
And that got
Respect
memed
for
so
Szechuan.
hard.
Yeah,
But
that's
there are
ridiculous.
there are literally maybe I can like hundreds of auctions on eBay completed for Taco Bell hot sauce. Like
Maybe
lot
Floridas
of
don't have
lot of
Taco
60 hot sauce packets sold for $8.50 plus $9.90 shipping. And there are dozens of auctions
Bell. I'm
like
going
this.
to Taco Bell
So
tonight.
I'm yeah, right.
That's
I'm
weird.
just I just got Taco Bell and I didn't get the sauce. Look at that. I'm lost in the
Money on
sauce
the
now.
table, man.
Damn.
I have my own sauce.
Hundreds of dollars worth of sauce, and you just left it.
On the table.
We used to have a
You're
drawer.
allowed to be
judging me.
capitalist. You're just-
At one of my old shared
Terrible.
apartments, we had a drawer that was literally Taco Bell hot sauce packets.
Right.
An entire
We had a
drawer.
sauce. Yeah, that's
Because you
it.
ask for like 4 and they give you 40 and then you dump them in the hot sauce drawer. That's normal,
Nice.
right? I'm normal.
Then you mix them all up for pizza
Yes.
sauce. Yep, that's what we used to do.
I got a drawer like that in my house right now too, so I can't say anything. Well, with that great little tidbit of news that came from Chase, I am sad to say that we are actually out of time. If you liked what you heard, and we know that you did because you're still with us right now, go ahead and smash that like button for the algorithms. If you use Facebook, Twitch, or YouTube, hit the like, leave us a review or a comment. It really does help us out, grow the community, and get beyond our little community that we are right now. If you want to get to know the community more, please, and you do Facebook, please join the Facebook community at groups/Tribune Commons on Facebook, as that is the primary communications that we have with our community right now, or join the Discord, which is we're trying to grow as well. And as always, keep your head up through the political storm.
And political.